Hey, thanks for joining us this hour for The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here are headlines. France recalls its ambassador to Algeria and orders its 12 diplomats to leave the country immediately following Algeria's expulsion of the diplomats. China appoints a new trade envoy to the United States amid the so-called Trump tariff barriers and trade bullying. Plus, former Peruvian President Orlando Humala bags 15 years in prison after being found guilty of money laundering. Let's get into it. We kick things off in France as President Emmanuel Macron recalls the ambassador to Algeria and orders 12 Algerian diplomats to leave Paris. This is coming after Algeria just days ago expelled 12 French officials after one of its consular staff was arrested over the kidnapping of a government critic living in Paris. President Emmanuel Macron condemned the move, calling it unjustified and incomprehensible. The two countries have blamed each other for what Paris has called a sudden deterioration in bilateral relations. But Algerian Minister Sofiane Chaib said the latest fabricated spat was down to French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau, when relations had been in a phase of warming up. They saw it last year when Macron announced that France was recognizing Moroccan sovereignty of Western Sahara and backed a plan for limited autonomy for the disputed territory. Algeria backs the pro-independence Polisario Front in Western Sahara and is seen as its main ally. Relations deteriorated even further after French-Algerian novelist Boualem Sansal was arrested at Algiers airport in November and jailed for 5 years. Then came a February knife attack in the eastern city of Mulhouse. The leaders of both countries have not been able to address the issues face to face. Let's head all the way to South Africa, where American pastor Josh Sullivan has been found unharmed in the town of Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape on Tuesday evening. The 45-year-old was seized by a group of armed men last week as he led a prayer service at his church. He was rescued by South Africa's elite police unit, also known as the Hawks. Police say 3 suspects were killed during a high-intensity shootout as law enforcement officers approached the vehicle at a location where Sullivan was being held. There are no immediate details on the kidnappers who made a ransom demand, prompting the intervention of the police. The Hawks say Sullivan had been rescued following verified intelligence, wherein a coordinated team moved swiftly to the identified location. Over in the United States, the Trump administration announced late Monday it was moving to freeze $2.2 billion in grants and $60 million in contracts to Ivy League Harvard University. The federal freeze came hours after Harvard rejected demands from the Trump administration, arguing the changes pushed back by the government exceed its lawful authority and infringe on both the university's independence and its constitutional right. Harvard President Alan Garber said the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights, and that no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. The federal funding freeze will have a major impact on Harvard. The School of Public Health in the fiscal year of 2025. About 46% of the school's total budget came from federal funding for direct research costs and federal reimbursement of facilities and administration expenses required to support that research. As part of the freeze, leading tuberculosis researcher Sarah Fortune received an order from the federal government to halt her research. And in the White House, spokesperson Caroline Leavitt called on Harvard University to follow the law.
When it comes to Harvard, the president's position on this is grounded in common sense, in the basic principle that Jewish American students, or students of any faith, should not be illegally harassed and targeted on our nation's college campuses. And we unfortunately saw that illegal discrimination take place on the campus of Harvard. There are countless examples to prove it, particularly with the stunning confession by then Harvard President Claudine Gay, who said that that bullying and harassment depended on the context. The president at that time made it clear to the American public he was not going to tolerate illegal harassment and anti-Semitism taking place in violations of federal law. So the president made it clear to Harvard, follow federal law, no longer break Title VI, which was passed by Congress to ensure no student can be discriminated against on the basis of race, and you will receive federal funding. Unfortunately, Harvard has not taken the president or the administration's demands seriously. All the president is asking, don't break federal law, and then you can have your federal funding. I think the president is also begging a good question. More than $2 billion out the door to Harvard when they have a more than $50 billion endowment. Why are the American taxpayers subsidizing a university that has billions of dollars in the bank already? And we certainly should not be funding a place where such grave anti-Semitism exists.
Well, former U.S. President Barack Obama did weigh in on the Harvard funding situation, applauding the university's decision to refuse the White House demands, that is a change in its policy or losing federal money, in its first social media post, criticizing the Trump administration since last inauguration day. President Obama, who himself is a Harvard alum, described the freeze as unlawful and ham-handed. He called on other institutions to follow Harvard's lead in not conceding to Trump's demands. We're still in the, issues regarding the United States, and the move seen as even more defiant against the United States. China has unexpectedly appointed a new trade envoy, as officials said the U.S.'s practice of tariff barriers and trade bullying is having a serious impact on the global economic order. Li Keqiang is a former assistant commerce minister and WTO ambassador who's taken over from veteran trade negotiator Vice Commerce Minister Wang Xuan. The shift comes as Beijing refuses to back down in an escalating trade war with Washington, triggered by President Donald Trump's heavy tariffs on Chinese goods. China already has a sluggish economy that's bracing for the impact, according to a key analyst on the issue. But earlier today, Beijing announced its GDP grew by 5.4% between January and March compared with the same period of last year. That figure has exceeded expectations but reflects the period before U.S. tariffs jumped from 10 to 145%, and Chinese officials warned of more economic pain ahead. While both Washington and Beijing have said they're open to negotiation, neither have made a move to do so yet. Speaking of China, President Xi Jinping continues his tour of Southeast Asia in his bid to rally support amid its tariff war with the United States. On Tuesday, he arrived in Malaysia, where he was welcomed by King Sultan Ibrahim. It's his first visit to the country since 2013. He'd come from Vietnam, where he had signed various trade agreements ranging from artificial intelligence to railway developments. China's accused Washington of economic bullying, stating it will fight until the end if Trump insists on provoking a tariff war. And we hear from former U.S. President Joe Biden, who's used his first speech since leaving office to criticize the Trump administration's welfare policies. The ex-U.S. president told a conference in Chicago that government had taken a hatchet to the social security system, which Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who is leading the White House's cost-cutting efforts, claim is beset by fraud. The administration wants to cut off staff at the agency responsible for spending $1.6 trillion in benefits a year. Biden did not refer to Trump by name during his speech on Tuesday, but he said, in fewer than 100 days, this new administration has done so much damage and so much destruction, it's kind of breathtaking. He described Social Security as a sacred promise, adding, "We know just how much Social Security matters to people's lives." Biden, who was speaking at a disability rights event, did not address his departure from the White House or the 2024 presidential election during his remarks. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, great to, hear from you. How much of an impact will that funding freeze to Harvard have on the institution?
Yes, good evening. It is going to have a tremendous impact when you talk about millions and potentially billions of dollars that are going to be frozen. It'll have an impact on their research. It'll have an impact on some of their programs. One thing people don't really think about is when you talk about research-heavy institutions, some of our cancer research, Alzheimer's research, aging research around diseases we don't even know about yet is underway at these large institutions like Harvard. And so that is going to probably have to take a halt in some areas, or at least be decreased in the amount of time and efforts that will be able to be put into those type of research projects. It'll also put a hold on hiring of individuals, so they won't be able to hire people for these types of research initiatives. We also know that in addition to some of the research that'll be impacted, it could have an impact on over 500 students, close to 80 faculty, not being able to stay at the institution in the university. And so that's another grave concern for the institution. We do know, though, that Harvard has quite an endowment that will allow their normal operations to continue. And so it won't impact too much of the academic operations of the institution, but it will impact the research, which I think is the greater concern, is what that does for the research, not only in the United States, but across the world.
And I've heard in some quarters, that universities are supposed to be independent, of whatever political party is in government and whatever political leanings there are. But the institution that was founded in 1636, has there ever been, a time in its history, in its existence, that it has been forced to follow political ideologies or pander to whichever political party is in power?
If you think about the founding principles of the United States, they're focused on freedom and freedom of speech specifically. And so when you think about what higher ed institutions have meant to that kind of belief system, they have kind of been at the forefront of that. And so we would not typically see this type of occurrence. Have there been federal mandates that universities, even private institutions, have had to comply with or at least respond to? Yes. But ones of this nature, I think, is not something that we are accustomed to seeing. As you mentioned, this is the first institution of higher education established in the United States and was founded on those very principles. And it being a private institution, it does have far more leeway to be able to focus on those freedom of speech, is not having to comply with mandates because it's not a state or federally run institution.
And when you have alumna like the former U.S. President Barack Obama wading in into, conversations like this, he's egging the institution on, commending them for standing up to the Trump administration and then urging other institutions to do the same. Are there other institutions towing the same line with Harvard at this time?
There are other institutions that are obviously supporting Harvard. We know that some institutions don't have the type of endowment that Harvard has, or have decided to take a different route and not necessarily have been as outspoken as Harvard has been in this situation. And so there are ones that are supporting, but might not be able to take the same measures. We know what happened with Columbia not too long ago, just a few weeks ago. And we also know other institutions, Northwestern potentially will be seeing some additional investigations. And there are other institutions as well that are under investigation and could be facing similar situations.
Right. And Maria, let's talk about how Washington is responding to China's new move today, appointing a new trade envoy. It's clear this is because of the trade war between the United States and China, but it definitely sends a clear message to Washington that China is not backing down. Is that also how Washington is interpreting this move?
Yes, it is clear that China, as you said, is not backing down. Washington is very clear on the message that is being put forth from China. I think this was expected, as China has warned Trump of tariff shocks It's already sluggish economy, even as it's grown for 5.4% in the first quarter year on year. But has had an impact on the global economy. But we do know that China is finding ways to rebound. We know that China has obviously asked other countries that are allies of theirs to come and support and to not bow down. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not the U.S. and China are able to have a diplomatic conversation around these tariffs, or if we'll continue to see the tension escalating, and what this will mean for the United States. We know that the U.S. is one of the largest consumers of Chinese goods. We know the president has been very clear that he wants to bring more manufacturing, more good development right here in the United States. And so that being able to buy U.S. goods is going to be key and critical. But at this time, it is often clear that China is not backing down, is looking for other ways to have allies to support them in these measures, and not seeing where the U.S. is going to be able to get up to scale quickly enough. And I think the president is realizing that as well, which is why some of the tariffs with other countries have been reduced. But it's a time, I think, that America is definitely looking to see how to address that. We know that chips have been a major concern as well. You think about cell phone usage, all of things that the U.S. Brings in from China that are key and critical to the economic infrastructure.
Right. And then you also have former U.S. President Joe Biden. I think a former president's all speaking up this week. Since the first time he left office, Joe Biden did say that the Trump administration is, Trump has been having a field day in office. It's just a summary of what he's saying. And none of it is normal, is what he's saying. Is it normal for former or outgone U.S. presidents to criticize their successors so short a time since leaving office?
Well, we know that this was a very tight election. This was an election that was historic, as we said, time and time again throughout the summer and into the fall. And so these are two polar opposite leaders. And former President Biden was very clear that he did not believe that some of the things in which the previous administration had done was in alignment with what's best for the country. So this is not a surprise based off of previous conversations and commentary from the former president.
But it will have no impact, of course, on Trump supporters. A lot of them sing in his praise. They blindly approve everything he's done, everything he's said so far. So who exactly is Biden's message directed at?
His message is really going to be directed at those Americans who right now are trying to figure it out, that are concerned, even though Americans have much hope about what's happening and much hope about what's going to be next with potentially being able to recover the economy in the United States. There are those who are at the Democratic Party. The Democratic base has to be revitalized. The Democratic base has obviously taken a major blow recently. And so he's trying to regalvanize those individuals who were his supporters and obviously are still looking to see where the Democratic Party is going to stand moving forward.
Well, a lot more to talk about in the United States. Thank you, Maria, for breaking it down for us. We're off on a short break now on The World Today. Still ahead. Palestinian militant group Hamas says it's lost contact with a group of fighters holding an Israeli-American hostage captive in Gaza. Stay with us for details. Welcome back. Prosecutors in Berlin have charged a doctor with 15 counts of murder, alleging that he administered lethal doses of medication to palliative care patients. The now 40-year-old doctor, who worked with the palliative care team of a nursing service, is alleged to have acted out of malice and other base motives. The victims were reportedly between the age of 56 and 94 years. The accused has been in custody since August 2024. He has not yet commented on the charges. Prosecutors are seeking a lifelong professional ban for the suspect who had been active as a medic in several German states. During the course of the investigation, the Public Prosecutor's Office also ordered exhumations, with investigations reportedly still ongoing in some cases. An investigative team is also evaluating the doctor's patient records for more evidence. The man, not officially named, in line with German privacy laws, initially came under suspicion over 4 deaths last year after he allegedly torched the victims' homes. The death toll could still rise even after investigators uncovered more possible victims dating back to 2021. Peru's former president, Ollanta Humala, has been found guilty of money laundering and sentenced to 15 years in prison. A court in the capital, Lima, said he had accepted illegal funds from the Venezuelan president at the time, Hugo Chavez, and from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht to bankroll his election campaigns in 2006 and 2011. Humala's lawyer said he would appeal against the conviction. His wife, Nadine Heredia, was also found guilty of money laundering and sentenced to 15 years in jail. However, she has been granted safe passage to Brazil after seeking asylum in the embassy. Humala's lawyer said he would appeal against the conviction. Now, unlike her husband, Heredia was not present in court when Judge Nyako Coronado passed the sentence. She had entered the Brazilian embassy along with the couple's son before an arrest warrant could be executed. Brazil offered her asylum, and the Peruvian government said it would honor the 1954 Asylum Convention to grant both Heredia and her son safe passage. Prosecutors say that Humala and his wife, with whom he co-founded the Nationalist Party, had accepted $3 million in illegal contributions from the firm, which they used to finance his 2011 presidential campaign. They also accused him of taking $200,000 from Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez to bankroll the 2006 campaign. More in politics, opposition leader Rahul Gandhi and his mother Sonia, the most senior members of India's Nehru-Gandhi political dynasty, have been accused in a money laundering case by the country's Financial Crimes Agency. According to news agency ANI, the Financial Crimes Agency, the Enforcement Directorate, presented the findings of its investigation in the case known as a charge sheet to a New Delhi court. The ED accused the Gandhis, who have previously denied any wrongdoing in the case, of forming a shell company to illegally take control of property worth $300 million that belonged to a firm that published the National Herald newspaper. The charge sheet also names other members of the main opposition Congress party, according to news media. The Jordanian government says it foiled what it called pilots aimed at harming Jordan's national security and destabilizing the country after 16 people were arrested who had been trained abroad. This was stated by the Minister of Government Communications and spokesperson for the Jordanian government, Mohammed Al-Momani, during a press conference in Amman, the capital. Al-Momani said the General Intelligence Service had foiled the plots, adding that all the 16 people involved had been arrested. He stressed that the General Intelligence Service has been pursuing this cell since 2021 until all the members who carried out separate operations and tasks were arrested and later referred to the State Security Court. The spokesperson claimed the group members managed to manufacture short-range missiles, possessed explosives and automatic weapons, hid a missile ready for use, and initiated a drone manufacturing facility. We're in Palestine, or Gaza now, where Hamas says it's lost contact with a group of fighters holding an Israeli-American hostage captive in Gaza following an Israeli strike on their location. The 21-year-old soldier Eden Alexander has appeared in videos released by the group in recent days. Israel had asked him to be released on day one of a new 45-day ceasefire proposal put forward last week, which has been rejected by Hamas. Hamas on Tuesday did not indicate when contact had been lost and has not produced any evidence for their claim. Israel regularly asserts it avoids hitting locations where it believes hostages are being held. Of the 251 hostages taken by Hamas in 2023, 59 remain in the enclave, 24 of whom are believed to be alive. 5 of the hostages in Gaza are believed to be U.S. citizens. Alexander was thought to be the only one still alive. Hamas later on Tuesday released a video addressed to the families of the remaining hostages, warning that they would return in coffins in Israel if Israel continued its military offensive in Gaza. In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated his unwavering commitment to achieving his war aims and securing the release of all hostages held by Hamas during a Tuesday visit to the northern Gaza Strip, accompanied by Defense Minister Israel Katz. He was seen alongside Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and senior military officials, including IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir and Southern Command Chief Major General Yaniv Assor, receiving a security briefing on intensive IDF operations in the area. He told them Hamas has taken more and more blows. We insist that our hostages are released, and we insist on achieving all of our objectives for the war, and are doing so thanks to our heroic fighters. He then displayed a document purportedly issued by Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, which he claimed had been presented during negotiations with U.S. officials. The text, he alleged, was why Israel must be destroyed. Netanyahu says, "We are fighting for our existence, we are fighting for our future." We segue into Sudan. Marking 2 years since the outbreak of civil war, the paramilitary group has declared the formation of a rival government to counter the country's armed forces. The leader of the Rapid Support Forces, Mohammed Hamdan Hemti Dagalo, says the group is building what he calls the only realistic future for Sudan. According to his statement on social media, the RSF is building a state of law and not a state ruled by individuals, adding that his government would provide essential services such as education and healthcare to not only RSF-controlled areas, but the whole country. Meanwhile, fighting continues with the army, saying it has bombed RSF positions outside the city of El Fasher, forcing hundreds of thousands to flee the Zamzam refugee camp. Yesterday, London hosted a high-level conference marking the second anniversary of the conflict. During the international meeting, the UK promised an extra £120 million worth of food and medical assistance, urging the world not to turn its back on Sudan. The conference called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, but the African Union says it would not allow the country to be partitioned by the army and the RSF. Speaking about the war in Sudan, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres released a statement marking the anniversary yesterday. It was read out by his associate spokesperson, Stephanie Tremblay. The Secretary General called on the world not to forget Sudan.
The only way to ensure the protection of civilians is to end this senseless conflict. The Secretary General is deeply concerned that weapons and fighters continue to flow into Sudan, allowing the conflict to persist and spread across the country. The external support and flow of weapons must end. Those with greatest influence on the parties must use it to better the lives of people in Sudan, not to perpetuate this disaster. Comprehensive, revitalized, and well-coordinated political efforts are urgently needed to prevent Sudan's further fragmentation. As an international community, we must find ways to help the Sudanese people bring this unspeakable catastrophe to an end and establish acceptable transitional arrangements. Sudan remains a highest priority for the United Nations. The Secretary General will continue to engage with regional leaders on means to enhance our collective efforts for peace. This will complement the ongoing work of the Secretary General's personal envoy, Ramtam Lamamra, who will seek to ensure international mediation efforts are mutually reinforcing. He will also continue to explore with the parties ways to bring them closer to a peaceful solution and support and empower civilians as they work towards a common vision for Sudan's future. We must renew our focus on finding an end to this brutal war. The world must not forget the people of Sudan.
Now, much earlier, my colleague Laya Olarinde spoke with a Sudanese citizen and social media influencer Nasruddin Mohammed about the situation in Sudan.
I'm calling the international organizations and also the African Union to start entering this something which happened, especially us. We are facing difficulty of living because here we have becoming a hopeless, because we many schools close it, and also there's no medicine, and this displacement is still going on continually, and it's especially in the Darfur region. This is something which happens is really affected us and will affect our future. We need a helping hand from the international organizations also, because we are in a bad situation. People just they become like just they are working for eating. Even other sites in other regions, they don't even get the water to drink. When we see today, we are afraid to see tomorrow because we don't know what tomorrow may bring. This is what happened and still happening things, and it's still happening. And it's something that really affected most of the citizens. It's just hunger. Here, everyone works to get what to eat. They don't have just hoping for tomorrow or hoping for combination what they are getting, because there is not even work, because even the government tried to get from the citizens. There is no work, and also there is no something that can support others. Just, if I came here, I can say that we are following where the authority is conquered. Here, there, Al-Burhan military, and people will lie on that. If those come to this side, and also they will follow them. This is what happened. They are following not because they love them. They are following forcibly.
We're off at another break now on The World Today. Still ahead. We'll have more cheery news after. Spring is indeed springing in China, with celebration of the Water Splashing Festival making the arrival of the new year in Yunnan province. Stay with us. Our journey through the Sudanese war continues now, with international reports unveiling harrowing violations in the capital Khartoum, much of which was recaptured by the army in 2025. The ongoing conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces has now come under renewed international scrutiny, not only as a military confrontation, but as a deeper ideological battle tearing the country apart.
Beyond the front lines, Sudan is gripped by a polarizing ideological struggle. On one side stand Islamists and supporters of the former regime who back the army under General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. On the other, civilian and secular movements, such as the Sudanese Professionals Association, have aligned with the Rapid Support Forces, viewing them, despite their flaws, as a lesser threat to democratic aspirations than the army and its Islamist allies. A report by Sudan War Monitor dated May 15, 2024 revealed that Islamist figures, including high-ranking members of Omar al-Bashir's regime, now hold key positions within the military hierarchy and are pushing to impose a rigid ideological vision on the state. According to the International Organization for Migration, IOM, this ideological divide pits an entrenched religious conservatism against a fragile secular dream, casting a long shadow over the country's future. As the army tightened its grip on Khartoum, international human rights organizations, including the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and Human Rights Watch, documented widespread abuses, some of which were perpetrated by Islamist militias allied with the military. UN reports have also detailed mass violence that has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions, including the reported use of banned weapons such as toxic gas. Amid this ideological warfare, Sudan remains trapped in a conflict that continues to devastate its people and shatter their hopes for peace and democracy.
Here in Nigeria, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction, Professor Nentawe Goshwe, says the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UNOCHA, is to shut down its operations in the country. He disclosed this during a validation workshop on anticipatory action framework for Nigeria at the National Counterterrorism Center in Abuja. According to him, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator, Mr. Mohammed Fall, had informed him about the decision. The minister describes as unfortunate the decision by the agency to pull out of Nigeria in the face of daunting humanitarian challenges still experienced across the country. However, he has commended UNOCHA for its intervention in Nigeria, especially in conflict-ripped northeastern states. To bilateral issues now, reaching out to strengthen diplomatic ties is important for the progress of Western Africa and by extension Africa. It's become even more necessary given the current global economic realities, which is why the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs in Lagos recently organized a Nigeria-Liberia roundtable to commemorate the visit of the Liberian finance minister to the country recently. The Nigerian Institute of International Affairs in Lagos has become the meeting point for diplomatic and bilateral conversations over the years. And so, when the Liberian Minister of Finance and Development Planning, Augustine Ngafwan, scheduled a visit to Big Brother Nigeria, it was only natural he would make a stopover at the Institute. Attending this special roundtable are senior members of the Institute, members of the diplomatic community, and members of Nigeria's business community. In his open address, the NIIA Director General, Professor Ehosa Osage, recalled his time in Liberia before its civil war, testifying to the resilience and hard work of the people who have always maintained relations with Nigeria.
The slave ships that were seized and arrested on the high seas after Liberia became an independent country had to discharge their human cargo in Monrovia, and those people became citizens of Liberia. And they retained their original names. So having just been enslaved from Nigeria and so on, if my name was Ngozi, I remained Ngozi. If I was Azikiwe, I remained Azikiwe. So don't think when you come across those names that it is Nigerians who emigrated in this present era to become part of Liberia. Now, many of the fishing people in and around Monrovia for a long time were Ijos and Urhobos and Isokos. So if you were to go there and you find people speaking Urhobo and speaking Isoko and speaking... Professor Ubi, what language do you speak? Bakumiri. Baumolu, well, you'll find them too in Monrovia. So the guys are indigenous, and that's very fine. So when Liberia comes here, Liberia is home. I want to say to us that there is a lot we have in common. Don't date our commonality from ECOMOG. We have been strongly with Liberia. And I'm glad that the Minister of Finance is here. I was saying to members of the business community here in the last 1 week, better come here and take your bearings from the opportunities on offer in Liberia.
The Director General's brief walk down memory lane reminded the finance minister of Nigeria's intervention into the civil war that wrecked his country.
During the height of our war, Nigeria stood strong, helped us through it. Whether it was through the ECOWAS initiative that was called ECOMOG, or with the UN initiative that was at one point called UNIMIL, and then UNMIL, Nigerian troops were there. They dominated. And so we have peace today in Liberia. Yes, we can attribute it to many other things, but because the big brother in the region indeed was our big brother during the time of need. And we in Liberia remain eternally grateful.
He brings attendees to the present by advising on Africa's response to the recent global tariffs imposed on by the U.S. president, saying now is a time for countries to rally together.
What we need to do is to quicken the pace so that we can achieve all the ambitions that are set forth in the Free Trade Area Agreement. I was the country manager of the African Development Bank in Uganda for quite a while, but I'm a West African. The East African have their bloc. Within East Africa, they can travel freely, but if a West African is traveling there, you need visa. You know, so we have a situation where the regional economic blocs have created free movements for themselves across the continent, you know, but there is no free movement across the blocs. So the question is, why are we not creating the situation that exists in Europe, where a European with a European passport can travel in any part of the EU region? Why can't we do that?
He emphasizes political stability in his country, Liberia, and marketed its economic viability, urging Nigerian businesses to come to Liberia to invest. The roundtable comes to an end after a brief question and answer session, leaving attendees more curious about Liberia. Now, U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright has told an exclusive interview the United States is edging closer to a landmark energy partnership with Saudi Arabia that could pave way for commercial nuclear development in the kingdom. Mr. Wright confirmed the U.S. is preparing to sign a broad energy cooperation agreement within weeks, with a specific deal on nuclear likely to follow within months. Such a deal would hinge on Saudi Arabia signing a so-called 123 agreement with the United States, a prerequisite for any U.S. nuclear cooperation under the Atomic Energy Act. These agreements are legally binding and designed to ensure that civilian nuclear cooperation does not contribute to weapons proliferation. Iraqi health officials say more than 1,000 people with respiratory problems after a sandstorm swept across the central and southern parts of the country. One official in Montana province reported at least 700 cases of what they said was suffocation. Dust storms are common in Iraq, but some experts believe that they're becoming more frequent due to climate change. And the second edition of the Abu Dhabi Global Health Week kicked off on Tuesday in the capital. The event will run until April 17th. It's attracting more than 15,000 participants from around the world, along with more than 325 organizations and exhibitors. Dr. Mujtaba Ali Khan, head of the clinical innovation at Burjeel Holding and CEO of Burjeel Medic, explains his technologies on display.
First word.
It is our great honor to work with UAE leadership. The leadership in this country is so visionary in trying to drive improvement in healthcare and almost every sector, but the one that we're passionate about is healthcare. And Burjeel has been a partner with the leadership of this country to be able to deliver cutting-edge care for all patients. The vision that this country's leadership has in the AI space has really given us the ability and the roadmap for what we want to do and implement here and abroad. And so we want to be able to be partnering even more with UAE leadership to be able to give them the beacon that what UAE should be as a role model for healthcare in the for future.
And since the Taliban seized power in 2021, girls over the age of 12 have been barred from getting an education and older women from many jobs. 19-year-old Salihir Hassani says that education has been taken from them, so they turned to workshop. In 2020, only 19% of women were part of the workforce, 4 times less than men. That number's dropped even further under Taliban rule. The lack of opportunities, coupled with the dire economic situation around the country, has pushed many into long, laborious days of carpet weaving, one of the few trades the Taliban government allows women to work in. Let's head to China now, where the Dai ethnic minority in Yunnan province celebrated the Water Splashing Festival to mark the arrival of the new year from Tuesday. This year, festivities in southwest China took place from April 14 to 16. The first 2 days of the celebration unfolded along the banks of the Langkang River, with a bustling market featuring local merchandise and foods, while artists showcased sand sculptures nearby. On the last day of the Dai New Year celebrations, which is today, the much anticipated water splashing ritual began with solemn ceremony of bathing the Buddha, signifying spiritual cleansing. Guess that's what they're doing. In Dai culture, water holds profound significance as a sacred element symbolizing spiritual purification and the sharing of goodwill and prosperity among all. Here's where we anchor on the program today. Indian sailboat NSV Tarini, famous for being run by a female crew of sailors, set in sail for the last leg of her round-the-world voyage. The leaving ceremony was attended by the Consul General of India in Cape Town and India's military attaché in South Africa, among other dignitaries. They expressing their hopes that the event would help popularize sailing. A sailing crew consists of Lieutenant Commander Dilna K and Lieutenant Commander Rupa A, who admitted to being excited about the opportunity to participate in the voyage. The organizers hope it will help strengthen maritime cooperation between India and friendly countries in the Indian Ocean region.
Yeah, so what do I do now? I need to get through the parts that is...
Okay. Also called somehow in time. This is somehow in time, not just in time.
We have been sailing for 7 months, and there are a lot of mental and physical exhaustion which happens, and we don't get regular sleep, and we don't have a regular sleep patterns. So these are some challenges which we face. but at the end, we are going through it. We have got a very good training from Indian Navy. We have been training since last 3 years, so we are well prepared in that way.
This is something, biggest challenge which I had taken up for myself, because I was into sailing before I volunteered for this project, and going around the world circumnavigating is a dream of every sailor, and this has been a very transformative and humbling experience for me altogether. We have faced a lot of challenges, a lot of good moments, and challenges as well, but in the end it has been very informative, and we've learned a lot.
This also is very significant to Indian Navy, because it portrays women empowerment, greater role of women in the armed forces, in adventure, to motivate the next generation to take up ocean sailing, which is a true testament of courage and skills, so to say, to take this unique art of ocean sailing forward.
Well, Godspeed to the crew. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.